Admiral Rise activated the tactical display as Lieutenant Commander Elias Novick entered the bridge, carrying the final authorization codes. His uniform, like those of all Tempest crew members, wore no official insignia, only a small hurricane symbol embroidered in silver thread. "All stations report ready, Admiral," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of what they were about to attempt. "Engineering confirms gravimetric torus is at optimal capacity." Reyes nodded, studying the holographic representation of the Scathian outpost orbiting New Darwin. The alien structure resembled a massive insectoid creature, all sharp angles and predatory design. Beneath it, the blue-green world that 17,000 human colonists called home rotated peacefully, unaware of the confrontation about to unfold in its skies. "The Scathians have begun landing procedures at the capital settlement," reported Communications Officer Maya Chen. "Colony Governor Harrington is stalling, but they're threatening to bypass standard protocols if he doesn't comply within the hour." Reyes tightened her grip on the command rail. "Then we have 45 minutes to make our statement." She turned to address the bridge crew, their faces illuminated by the soft blue glow of their consoles. "What we do today changes humanity's future forever. For too long, we've been relegated to the margins of galactic politics, our potential restricted, our grievances ignored." Through the viewport, the stars stretched and distorted as the Tempest's engines prepared for the jump to hyperspace. The ship hummed with power, the culmination of a project so classified that even Earth's primary government had only partial knowledge of its existence. "Navigation," Reyes called out, "final coordinates locked." "Confirmed, Admiral," answered Navigator Jackson. "We'll emerge 17 kilometers from the Scathian outpost, outside their standard sensor envelope, but well within weapons range." Chief Medical Officer Dr. Samira Khalid approached Rice, her dark eyes serious. "The crew is preparing for potential casualties, Admiral, but I should remind you, we have no real-world data on how Scathian weapons might affect our hull. The simulations can only predict so much." Reyes nodded. "Noted, Doctor. Let's hope their weapons remain theoretical from our perspective." The ship's executive officer, Commander Victor Rodriguez, joined them at the command console. "Admiral, there's something else you should know. Intelligence just decoded a partial Scathian transmission. This isn't just another annexation. They're planning to use New Darwin as a staging area for claiming the entire sector." Reyes' jaw tightened. The hegemony's rules of engagement technically prohibited stopping legal annexations once initiated, but allowed defensive operations to prevent future territorial claims. This information provided the thin veneer of legitimacy they needed. "Sound battle stations," she ordered, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Prepare the primary hurricane generator. We'll make this count." Throughout the massive vessel, crimson alert lights bathed corridors in blood-red illumination. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency to their positions as the automated announcement echoed through the decks. "All hands to battle stations. Hurricane protocol initiated. This is not a drill." In the engine room, Chief Engineer Nakamura said a brief prayer before activating the gravimetric stabilizers. The technology they'd created violated at least 17 hegemony prohibitions on human scientific advancement. Today would reveal if those prohibitions had been meant to protect the galaxy from humans, or to protect the galaxy's powers from what humans might become. "Jump in 5, came Navigator Jackson's voice over the intercom. 4, 3, 2, 1. The stars outside blurred completely as the Tempest tore a hole in space-time, hurtling toward a confrontation that would redefine humanity's place among the stars. As the Tempest prepared for its historic confrontation, Nakamura descended into the heart of the ship. The quantum displacement chamber was a perfect sphere suspended in the center of the vessel, accessible only through a narrow walkway that seemed to hover in midair. Inside this chamber, the laws of physics were not so much broken as rewritten. "Status report," he demanded, his voice cutting through the low hum of the machinery. His assistant, Sophia Chen, manipulated a series of holographic controls, her fingers dancing through light. The gravitational wavelength modulators are operating at 97% efficiency. The artificial vortex is stable, though we're seeing minor fluctuations in the tertiary containment field. Nakamura frowned. Even minor fluctuations could cascade into critical failures when dealing with forces this powerful. He pulled up the diagnostic panel and studied the energy signatures. The technology that powered the Tempest had been developed in secret over 15 years, funded by a coalition of Earth's nations who had grown tired of the hegemony's restrictions. Adjust the harmonic resonance by 0.3 degrees, he instructed, and increase power to the stabilizers in sections 14 through 17. As Sophia made the adjustments, Dr. Amara Okafor entered the chamber. The weapons specialist carried her tablet like a shield, her expression grave. "The main cannon is primed," she reported, "but I'm concerned about the thermal buildup. We've never fired at full capacity outside of simulations." Nakamura nodded, understanding her concern. The hurricane technology didn't simply destroy targets, it unleashed controlled chaos upon them. The cannon created a spiraling energy vortex that mimicked the eye wall of a terrestrial hurricane, concentrating destructive force with unprecedented precision. "Show me the latest calibrations," he said, taking the tablet from her hands. The three engineers huddled together, reviewing the complex equations that governed their revolutionary weapon. Unlike conventional energy weapons that relied on brute force, the hurricane cannon required perfect mathematical harmony, a balance point where numerous chaotic systems briefly aligned to create a moment of devastating order. "If we adjust the rotational velocity here," Okafor suggested, pointing to a sequence of numbers, "we can reduce the thermal load by 18% without sacrificing penetration power." Before Nakamura could respond, a voice came over the intercom. "Engineering, this is the bridge. We've completed the hyperspace jump. Scythian outpost is in visual range. Prepare primary systems for engagement." Nakamura shared a look with his colleagues. Years of work, billions in resources, and the futures of countless human colonies now rested on their creation performing as designed. "Acknowledged, bridge," he responded. "Hurricane systems coming online now." Throughout the massive ship, specialized conduits began channeling energy to the gravimetric torus. The artificial hurricane at the core of the vessel spun faster, creating a controlled vortex that simultaneously powered the ship's weapons and generated its revolutionary defenses. In the engine room below, senior technician Marcus Wong monitored the quantum fluctuations as power levels climbed toward combat threshold. The technology they created was beautiful in its complexity, drawing inspiration from Earth's most destructive natural phenomenon and transforming it into humanity's salvation. "Primary vortex achieving stability," Sophia announced, her voice steady despite the tension filling the chamber. "All subsystems nominal." Nakamura placed his palm against the transparent barrier separating them from the swirling energy core. The artificial hurricane responded to his presence, its patterns shifting subtly as if acknowledging its creator. "The hegemony thought they were protecting the galaxy by restricting our technology," he said quietly. "They never understood that limitations only drive human innovation." A subtle vibration ran through the deck plates as the Tempest's targeting systems locked onto the Scythian outpost. The hurricane was about to make landfall. Captain Vrekel's escape pod tumbled through the debris field that had once been Fortress Immutable. Warning lights flashed across the cramped interior as life support systems struggled to compensate for damage sustained during the emergency ejection. Through the viewport, he watched in disbelief as the human vessel continued its methodical destruction of his command. "Impossible," he chittered, mandibles clicking in agitation. The Scythian Empire had conquered 17 human worlds without meaningful resistance. Their intelligence reports classified humans as technically proficient but militarily weak, a species that built comfortable colonies but lacked the evolutionary aggression to defend them properly. The comms unit crackled to life, carrying the desperate transmissions of his surviving officers. "Shields ineffective against the energy pattern. Weapons cannot lock on target. The gravity distortions air. The transmission cut off abruptly as another section of the station imploded. Vrekel's compound eyes fixed on the human vessel. Unlike the utilitarian designs favored by most species, this ship moved with unsettling grace. Its hull generated visible distortions in the surrounding space, like heat waves rising from sun-baked ground. The effect scrambled targeting systems and disrupted shield harmonics, rendering conventional defenses useless. His tactical officer, Sub-Commander Krex, activated the pod's enhanced sensors, struggling to make sense of the readings. "Captain, the human vessel is generating an artificial gravity well that mimics atmospheric weather patterns. It's as if they've created a storm in space." Vrekel had studied human history during his tactical training. Their homeworld experienced devastating weather phenomena called hurricanes, massive rotating storm systems that could level their primitive structures. Had they somehow weaponized this natural force? The human ship's main cannon fired again, its energy beams spiraling like the weather formations from human historical records. The station's remaining defensive batteries, already struggling against the gravitational interference, went silent as the beams severed power conduits with surgical precision. "Transmit all sensor data to Imperial Command," Vrekel ordered, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his thorax. "The hegemony must be warned. These humans have developed technology outside predicted parameters." On the station's main habitat ring, Scathian troops scrambled toward the remaining escape vessels. Their combat armor, designed to intimidate primitive colonists, offered no protection against the cascading system's failures triggered by the human attack. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, trapping dozens in sections exposed to vacuum when the next precision strike breached the hull. Vrekel's pod shuddered as its maneuvering thrusters engaged, pulling away from the expanding cloud of debris. The station that had stood as a symbol of Scathian military dominance for 3 centuries was being systematically disassembled by a single human vessel. His communications officer patched through a direct transmission from the human ship. The face that appeared on his screen was unsettlingly calm. A female human with dark skin and eyes that reminded Vrekel of the void between stars. "This is Admiral Helena Reyes of the HSS Tempest," she stated, her tone reflecting neither anger nor triumph. "New Darwin remains under human authority. There will be no annexation today." Vrekel's translator struggled with the nuances of human language, but the message was unmistakable. This was not a negotiation or a plea. It was a declaration. "You have violated hegemony protocols," he responded, falling back on diplomatic procedure. Annexation proceedings were filed and approved by the Galactic Council. Admiral Rey's expression remained unchanged. "Those protocols were designed to benefit your species at our expense. Consider this a formal amendment." The transmission ended abruptly as the Tempest's gravitational field intensified, pushing the escape pods further from the engagement zone. As his vessel stabilized, Vrekel received the automated distress responses from across the Scathian command network. 17 annexation fleets had been recalled from their positions near human colonies. For the first time in the Empire's history, they were retreating without a fight. The age of easy conquest had ended in a hurricane of human defiance. Ambassador Chen Wei maintained her composed demeanor as the Galactic Hegemony Council chamber descended further into chaos. Species that had ignored humanity for decades now frantically consulted with their governments via quantum entanglement communicators. The circular chamber, designed to emphasize the equality of all member species, had suddenly developed a new gravitational center, the human representative. "These actions constitute a direct violation of hegemony peace protocols," insisted Councillor Dzexvoth, the Ultharian diplomat whose gelatinous form quivered with indignation. "The annexation of underdeveloped worlds is a regulated process with established guidelines." Chen raised an eyebrow. "Guidelines that have conveniently resulted in 17 human colonies being absorbed by the Scathian Empire in the past decade." She gestured to her aide, who distributed data crystals to each council member. These contain the complete records of those annexations, including the suppression tactics employed against civilian populations. The High Chancellor's containment sphere drifted lower, its luminescent gases swirling with agitation. These accusations are serious, Ambassador Chen, but they do not justify military action without Council approval. We sought Council intervention 23 times, Chen replied, her voice sharp as a blade. Each petition was denied or delayed until the annexation was complete. Humanity has simply developed an alternative dispute resolution mechanism. The chamber's holographic display shifted to show technical readouts of the Tempest's capabilities, carefully edited to conceal its vulnerabilities while emphasizing its strengths. The casualty report from Fortress Immutable scrolled alongside. 6 Scathian fatalities, 42 injuries, all military personnel. Your hurricane technology, began the Niloxian scientific attaché, his crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the holographic light. Our preliminary analysis suggests principles that violate hegemony restrictions on gravitational manipulation. Chen smiled thinly. Restrictions imposed specifically on humanity after our initial experiments showed promising results. How convenient that shortly after those restrictions, 3 hegemony species developed similar technology. She paused, letting the implication settle. We simply continued our research, discreetly. The Scathian ambassador rose again, his damaged chitin creaking with the movement. The Empire does not recognize your claim of defensive action. Our annexation processes are legally sanctioned by this very council. A legal fiction we no longer acknowledge, Chen replied coolly. As I mentioned earlier, we have transmitted the coordinates of 3 additional Scathian annexation fleets currently approaching human colonies. The Tempest is en route to intercept the nearest. Would you prefer to save us all time and recall those fleets now? The Scathian's compound eyes reflected the holographic display as it shifted to show the Hurricane-class vessel's projected intercept course. For the first time in centuries of diplomatic service, the predatory species found itself in unfamiliar territory, prey rather than hunter. This council must sanction Earth for this unilateral military action. The Scathian insisted, though his voice carried less conviction than before. The Ukrainian delegate, a species renowned for strategic acumen, leaned forward. 6 eyes blinked in sequence as she assessed the situation. Perhaps, she suggested carefully, we should consider revising our position on human territorial claims before additional demonstrations become necessary. A murmur of cautious agreement spread through the chamber. The hegemony had maintained peace for millennia through carefully managed power balances and strategic technology restrictions. Humanity had just shattered that paradigm. The High Chancellor's containment sphere emitted a harmonious tone signaling a formal resolution. This council will immediately review all pending and completed annexations of human colonies. Until this review is complete, all military actions against human settlements will cease. Chen nodded graciously, as if this had been her proposal all along. Humanity appreciates the council's wisdom. We look forward to more equitable relations moving forward. As the session adjourned, the representatives of 27 spacefaring civilizations found themselves contemplating the same disturbing question. How many Hurricane-class ships did humanity actually possess? And what other secrets had they been developing in the shadows of hegemony restrictions? The bridge of the Tempest hummed with controlled tension as the massive gas giant Poseidon filled the view screen. Its swirling atmospheric bands, crimson, amber, and deep blue, churned with storms large enough to swallow Earth whole. Behind them, the Scathian pursuit fleet had closed to weapons range, 9 warships arranged in their traditional hunting formation. They're powering weapons arrays, reported Tactical Officer Hernandez, her fingers moving across her console with practiced efficiency. Reading energy buildup in their forward lance emitters. Admiral Reyes nodded, eyes fixed on the tactical display. Status of our gravitational shields. Operating at 86% capacity. Commander Rodriguez answered. The engagement at Fortress Immutable drained more power than anticipated. Reyes made her decision. Execute Tempest Maneuver Alpha. Take us into the upper atmosphere. Navigator Jackson's eyes widened slightly before professionalism reasserted itself. Confirmed, Admiral. Plotting descent trajectory into the northern storm band. The Tempest banked gracefully, its sleek hull designed specifically for this unprecedented tactic. As the ship approached the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere, Commander Sarah O'Neill activated the specialized gravimetric vortex generators that gave the vessel its name. Synchronizing with native storm system, she reported, studying the real-time atmospheric data. Poseidon's upper band contains a stable hurricane formation, approximately 8,000 kilometers in diameter. Harmonic convergence possible at these coordinates. On the pursuing Scythian flagship, Warlord Krazek watched with predatory satisfaction as the human vessel dove toward the gas giant. His mandibles clicked together in the Scythian expression of amusement. They seek refuge in the storms, he noted to his executive officer. A desperate gambit. His tactical officer was less confident. Warlord, our sensors are detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations around the human ship. Perhaps we should maintain distance until... Nonsense, Krazek interrupted. They flee because they know they cannot stand against 9 warships. Follow them in, but maintain separation between our vessels as we enter the atmosphere. As the Tempest penetrated the uppermost layers of Poseidon's atmosphere, the ship shuddered with turbulence. O'Neill's fingers danced across her gravitational control panel, making minute adjustments. Initiating harmonic resonance with the planetary storm system, she announced. Gravitational tether established with the native hurricane. What happened next defied conventional understanding of both spaceship combat and planetary physics. The Tempest didn't simply descend into the storm, it merged with it. The ship's hurricane generation technology created a sympathetic resonance with the natural phenomenon, amplifying its already immense power. The effect was immediate and devastating. 3 pursuing Scythian vessels that had followed too closely were caught in suddenly intensified storm bands. Winds exceeding 1,500 kilometers per hour tore at their hulls, while localized gravity distortions crushed compartments like eggshells. Warning klaxons blared across the Scythian fleet as their sensors struggled to make sense of what was happening. What manner of weapon is this? Demanded Warlord Krazek as his flagship lurched violently to port, barely avoiding the fate of its companions. Admiral Rice watched on the Tempest's rear sensors as the Scythian vessels tumbled helplessly. Status of the gravimetric torus. Engineer Nakamura's voice came through the comm system, tight with controlled excitement. Power levels at 112% of theoretical maximum. Admiral, the native storm is feeding our systems. We're drawing energy directly from Poseidon itself. Prepare to execute emergence on the far side. Rice ordered. Calculate maximum effective range for our augmented gravimetric field. As the Tempest rode the eye of the massive storm, the remaining Scythian vessels struggled to maintain formation. Their sensors, designed for vacuum operations, provided only fragmented data about the human ship that had somehow weaponized a gas giant's weather system against them. The Tempest curved gracefully through the planet's atmosphere, gathering power from the natural hurricane, while its own technology shaped and directed the destructive forces surrounding it. The ship wasn't just surviving within the storm. It was becoming the storm. Dr. Zrixel manipulated the 3-dimensional holographic model with his multiple limbs, adding new data points as they arrived from observation posts throughout the sector. The recreation of the Tempest's encounter with the Scythian fleet hung in the air before him, a swirling dance of light and mathematical notation that represented the most significant military innovation in centuries. The principles are elegant, noted Dr. Ilara Voss, studying the energy cascade patterns. They're not creating the gravitational distortions from nothing. They're amplifying existing microfluctuations in space-time fabric. The Hegemony's premier research facility, buried deep beneath the neutral world of Centaurus Prime, had been operating at emergency capacity since the first reports of the human vessel's capabilities. Scientists from a dozen species worked feverishly to understand the hurricane technology, and more importantly, to develop countermeasures. "What I find most disturbing," said Zrixel, his voice modulator adjusting to express concern, "is not what they accomplished, but how they accomplished it." He gestured with 3 limbs simultaneously, bringing forward the theoretical foundations of the hurricane technology. The mathematical principles displayed were recognizable, but implemented in ways no hegemony scientist had considered. They approached the problem from a completely different perspective, Voss explained to the assembled researchers. Where most species try to control chaotic systems by imposing order, humans instead look for patterns within the chaos itself. One of the younger Ultharian scientists rippled his gelatinous form in the gesture of confusion. "I don't understand the distinction." Voss smiled patiently. Most spacefaring species evolved on worlds with relatively stable environmental conditions. Predictability was essential for survival. She brought up an image of Earth. Humans come from a world of extreme atmospheric volatility. Their planet experiences thousands of hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, and droughts in a single orbital period. They don't see chaos as something to be conquered. They see it as something to be harnessed. Meanwhile, aboard the Tempest, engineer Nakamura wiped condensation from his display panel as warning indicators continued to multiply. The gravimetric torus chamber had developed hairline fractures along its southern quadrant, invisible to the naked eye, but critical to the ship's integrity. The feedback loop from Poseidon's storm system exceeded our containment parameters, he explained grimly to Admiral Reyes. "We designed the system to generate artificial hurricanes, not to channel the power of natural ones." Reyes studied the damage assessments with a carefully neutral expression. "Can it be repaired?" "Yes," Nakamura replied, "but not without a full shutdown and complete recalibration of the gravitational field generators. We need a specialized facility with quantum-stabilized construction platforms." "Estimated time?" Nakamura hesitated before answering. 3 weeks minimum, possibly 4. Reyes turned to look out the viewport at the stars beyond. The Tempest had emerged victorious from 2 engagements, establishing humanity's reputation as a force to be reckoned with. But it was all built on a dangerous bluff. Their only Hurricane-class ship was critically damaged, and the diplomatic advantage Ambassador Chen was leveraging depended entirely on the belief that Earth possessed a fleet of these vessels. "Can we maintain basic maneuvering capabilities?" she asked. "Yes, Admiral. The conventional drive systems are unaffected. We can travel, but we cannot engage the hurricane systems without risking catastrophic containment failure." Reyes nodded slowly. "Set course for Ceres Base. Maximum stealth protocols. As far as the galaxy is concerned, we're simply moving to our next objective." She activated the secure quantum channel to Earth. The message she needed to send was simple, but carried the weight of humanity's future. Their miracle weapon needed a miracle repair, and they had less than a month before the galaxy discovered the truth behind their sudden rise to power. Ambassador Chen maintained her perfect diplomatic posture as the Hegemony Council deliberated. The emergency session had stretched into its 14th hour, with representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations struggling to adapt to humanity's sudden ascension from afterthought to existential concern. "The proposed territorial concessions are unprecedented," objected the Niloxian representative, crystalline appendages gesturing at the star chart displaying the contested colonial regions. "The Scathian Empire has invested considerable resources in developing these sectors. Resources invested after forcibly annexing legally established human settlements." Chen countered smoothly. She adjusted her formal diplomatic attire. A subtle blend of traditional Earth styles and modern hegemony fashion that symbolized humanity's dual nature as both ancient culture and emerging power. Her aide discreetly passed her a data crystal containing Admiral Reyes' encrypted message. Chen maintained her expression of serene confidence while her stomach tightened with anxiety. The Tempest, humanity's only Hurricane-class vessel and the foundation of their newfound leverage, was critically damaged. Earth's shipyards are completing 2 additional Hurricane-class vessels this month, she announced to the Council, the light flowing from her lips with practiced ease. In the interest of galactic stability, we believe a more equitable arrangement of territorial rights would benefit all species. The Ukrainian delegate, respected for her strategic insight, leaned forward. What guarantees can Earth provide that these vessels will not be used for territorial expansion beyond your current colonial claims? Chen allowed herself a small smile. The same guarantees the hegemony provided when restricting our technological development for 50 years. The silence that followed was profound. Every species in the chamber recognized the elegant simplicity of the human position. After decades of being constrained by hegemony regulations, humanity had developed technology that bypassed those constraints entirely. They now held power that the existing system had never anticipated, and were willing to negotiate rather than conquer. As the Council recessed for private deliberations, Chen retreated to the secure Earth Embassy suite. Once inside the quantum-shielded chamber, she finally allowed her diplomatic mask to slip. "We have 3 weeks at most," she told her staff, accessing the technical readouts from the Tempest. "If the hegemony discovers our only Hurricane-class ship is undergoing critical repairs before we secure formal agreements, our position collapses entirely." Defense Minister Wang appeared on the holographic display, his weathered face grave. "Nakamura's team at Syrah's base has begun repairs, but the damage is more extensive than initially believed. The gravitational feedback from Poseidon's storm system caused molecular-level stress fractures throughout the torus containment chamber. Can it be repaired in time?" Chen asked. "Possibly," Wang replied without conviction. "We've diverted every specialist and resource we can spare, but Nakamura is working with theoretical science. No one has attempted repairs on this technology before because no one has built it before." Chen stared at the diplomatic draft on her display. The Treaty of New Darwin represented everything humanity had sought for generations: full recognition of all colonies, technology-sharing agreements, and the right to maintain independent military forces. "We need more time," she said finally. Minister Wang shook his head. "Ambassador, we can't stall forever. Every intelligence service in the hegemony is hunting for information about our hurricane fleet. Sooner or later, they'll discover the truth." Chen's eyes narrowed as an idea formed. "Then we need to control exactly what they discover." She began drafting a new directive for Earth's intelligence services. "If we can't maintain the reality of our deception, perhaps we can use the discovery of that deception to our advantage." "A double bluff?" Wang asked, understanding dawning on his face. Chen nodded. "The oldest diplomatic strategy in human history, letting your opponent believe they've uncovered your secret, only to discover too late it was exactly what you wanted them to find." Admiral Rice walked the observation deck of Orbital Station Freedom, watching as delegates from 27 species admired the HS Tempest through the massive transparent viewport. 6 months after its first historic engagement, the Hurricane-class battleship had achieved almost mythical status throughout the galaxy. Its sleek obsidian hull now bore subtle battle marks that the engineering team had deliberately left unrepaired, visible proof of its legendary encounters. The Ultharian ambassador is particularly fascinated by the gravitational containment systems, noted Commander Rodriguez, falling into step beside her. Their scientists have submitted 17 formal research collaboration proposals in the past week alone. Reyes nodded, suppressing a smile. The collaboration proposals were exactly what Earth had hoped for: access to alien scientific knowledge that had been restricted for generations, all freely offered in exchange for limited insights into hurricane technology. "And the Scathians?" she asked quietly. "Their military attaché has spent 3 hours studying the main cannon housing. Our sensors indicate elevated stress hormones in his system. I believe the humans of the 20th century would have called it sweating bullets." This time, Reyes allowed herself a small smile. The Scathian Empire, after 3 centuries of continuous expansion, had signed formal border agreements with humanity and withdrawn from contested systems. Their once-feared annexation fleets have been reassigned to defensive positions along their core worlds. Dr. Amara Okafor approached with a data tablet in hand. "Admiral, the demonstration is ready to begin whenever you give the word." Reyes followed Okafor to the central presentation chamber, where the Interspecies Technology Exchange Commission had gathered. The room fell silent as she entered, representatives from ancient spacefaring civilizations regarding her with a mixture of respect and wariness. "Distinguished delegates," she began, activating the holographic display at the center of the chamber. "Today marks the commencement of the Peaceful Applications Initiative for Hurricane Technology." The hologram showed a drought-stricken agricultural world in the Proxima system. Its atmospheric patterns appeared stagnant, clouds locked in patterns that prevented rainfall across the primary continental farmlands. 6 hours ago, we deployed a miniaturized hurricane generator in the upper atmosphere, Okafor explained, advancing the simulation. By creating a controlled low-pressure system and manipulating existing air currents, we were able to initiate precipitation over the affected regions. The hologram shifted to real-time footage from the planet's surface, where gentle rain was falling on parched fields for the first time in 2 years. The Niloxian delegates' crystalline structure vibrated with what humans had learned was their expression of deep emotion. The same principles that make hurricane technology effective in combat, the ability to create order from chaos through minimal but precise interventions, make it uniquely suited for environmental restoration. Reyes continued, "What began as a weapon has evolved into something far more valuable." The Ukrainian scientific director leaned forward, her 6 eyes blinking in sequence. "Your species developed this technology while under restriction. One might wonder what humanity might create without such constraints." Reyes met her gaze steadily. "That is precisely the question we hope to explore together, through cooperation rather than competition." As the presentation concluded, Reyes returned to the observation deck, gazing at Earth rising over the lunar horizon. Chief Engineer Nakamura joined her, his face reflecting both pride and wonder at how far they had come. "When we designed the Tempest, I never imagined it would lead to all this," he said softly. "I thought we were building a weapon to protect ourselves. Instead, we built a bridge." Reyes nodded thoughtfully. "The hurricane showed the galaxy what humans are capable of when threatened. Now we can show them what we're capable of when embraced." Below them, the diplomatic reception continued as representatives from civilizations spanning thousands of light years found themselves unified by a common interest: understanding the species that had harnessed chaos itself and emerged not as conquerors, but as innovators. The storm of change that had begun with a demonstration of power had transformed into something far more significant, a new understanding of humanity's unique place in the cosmic order.